Another webcam comparison from the gold standard, the Logitech Brio, to the new Anker C300. This is what it looks like. Hey, this is Scott Weidenkivowitz, a storyteller with a camera, talking about all the things photographers like you and I are thinking about. And in this video, I am going to be comparing the Logitech Brio audio and video to the Anker C300 audio and video. So before we dive into this, I just have to mention that I am recording this using Zencastr. That is a virtual podcast recording platform. It allows me to record podcast guests, both audio and video, remotely with the best possible audio and video quality that each person can get. Now, the reason that I'm using this is that I wanted to do this comparison in the most realistic way that these webcams would be used. Not with any professional camera, obviously, I'm using a webcam, and not with any professional mic. Typically, if I'm using Zencastr, I'm actually recording with a professional microphone, going into a mixer, going into the computer, and so on and so forth. And I have my Nikon Z6 as the camera, and the video quality and the audio quality is fantastic. But for this, I've got the two webcams hooked up to two different computers. The Logitech Brio is hooked up to my iMac, and my Anker C300 is hooked up to my MacBook Air that is sitting right here in the desk. Now, that is why if I happen to bump the desk, you see the shaking, because it's actually sitting, both of them are sitting on top of my iMac right now. First things first, you can tell that the angle, the field of view, is actually wider on the Anker camera, and that is because it has a 115-degree angle as the widest, whereas the Brio has a 90-degree angle at the widest. Now, both have software that could actually be adjusted. I can make them narrower using digital zoom, cropping, and things like that. They're both 4K sensors, so their cropping is actually almost lossless to a point. One thing that the Anker has is actually AI-based auto cropping and things like that. I am going to test that, but first, before I do, I wanted to just talk a little bit so you can hear the audio differences. This is the audio of the Logitech Brio. This is what the Logitech Brio sounds like. It is a cold day here in New Jersey, so my furnace is actually running, and so right now you might be hearing that in the background. This is the audio on the Anker C300. This is the audio on the Anker C300. Again, I'm going to be quiet, so let's see if we can hear the furnace in the background. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm actually going to go over to the MacBook Air, and I'm going to adjust the Anker settings, and let's see what happens if it first can even do it in real time while I'm actually using the webcam in another application. This is the 115-degree field of view. This is the 90-degree field of view, which actually matches the Brio spot on. I mean, these are basically identical at this point as far as field of view goes. And this is the 78 field of view. Again, it's probably getting maybe a little fuzzy, but not much. Let's go back to 115. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go in and HDR is on both of these webcams, by the way. HDR is on the Brio. HDR is on the Anker C300. I can turn HDR off on both. What it's basically doing is it's giving you some more light in the background. Now, of course, my studio is a mess right now, but it is what it is. Okay, so now this is the solo frame mode on the Anker C300, and in theory, this should start zooming in and following me around. So if I am to move around and I start going over here, I'm a little further from the camera, so I probably sound horrible. But really, it should be following me around. I don't see it moving. I don't see it moving. Let's see if I go to solo frame. If I go to solo frame, what happens here? I don't see anything happening with that either. So with solo frame, it should be following me and just me. What if I put this over my face? Put this in front of the camera. Anything? Nothing? Nothing? Oh, there we go. Look at that. So it just needed a little distraction. But now I am in frame, not the box. So if I was to do this again, and I go over here, Hey, it followed me. So that is the AI at work. It is finding my face and noticing that there's something in the way, and it's moving the crop to follow. So if I'm to now adjust myself, it should still follow along, but that was kind of fun. The Logitech Brio cannot do that. Okay, back at the 115 degree. And now I'm actually going to turn off HDR. I want you to see what it looks like with HDR turned off. And there you go. This is the Anker C300 with HDR off. And this is the Anker C300 with HDR on. Now, just like the Logitech Brio, the Anker software can also adjust brightness and sharpness and contrast and all those different things. So there's that. One thing I like about the Anker Works software, the software that drives this webcam, is that it can actually do the firmware update inside of the software, whereas Logitech's Camera Settings app, which is for the Mac that controls Logitech Brio, does not actually do the firmware in it. You have to download the firmware update separate and run that separate. I don't know why they did that. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to open up camera settings on the iMac, and I'm going to do some similar adjustments so you can see HDR on and off and that kind of stuff. So this is HDR on with the Brio. And now this is HDR turned off on the Logitech Brio. This is HDR off, and this is HDR on. And now I'm going to go from standard to widescreen. Something should change. I don't know if anything is changing. This is 90 degree, 78 degree, and then 65 degree. And you can see that it's still very crisp and clear on Logitech Brio. That sensor does a really, really nice job. And then, of course, there's also the ability to adjust focus and all that kind of stuff, white balance, and all that fun stuff right in here. I can also digitally zoom inside of the software if I want to. I could digitally zoom in more and adjust everything just like that. It's pretty cool how nice they make that. So let's zoom back out. Okay, so now what you're seeing is I've got both webcams. The Logitech Brio is on the left, and the Anker C300 is on the right. And I have the software open on my iMac to match how I have it set up on top of my iMac. The audio is actually being recorded right now with my Rodecaster Pro. So don't mind the video and audio being out of sync. I'm not too concerned about that. This is more just to show you what is happening here. These are the different softwares, and this is the main screen of the Logitech Camera Settings, and this is the main screen of the Anker Works settings. You can see here I can actually go full screen with this if I want for some reason. I don't think I need to. You can see that it actually looks clearer. Let's go widescreen so make sure these match perfectly. 115.
Eventually.
Now here's something interesting. I don't know what is going on, but when I have these both open side by side, and I switch the Logitech Camera Settings to widescreen, the Anker one actually freezes. So that is really interesting. I don't know what's going on. And in the moment I switch back to standard, the Anker pops right back in. I don't know. Maybe they use the same function or something in the code, and then they're conflicting. If I close Logitech, it's perfectly fine. So I'm going to leave it as standard image right now instead of widescreen, because again, if I go to widescreen, we freeze. Now, worth noting though, look at the image quality difference between the Logitech Brio and the Anker. You can see that the Logitech Brio is way clearer than the Anker one is. So again, video-wise, the Logitech video quality outperforms the Anker video quality. But you're talking the Logitech Brio is almost double the price of the Anker C300. Now you'll see here, if I go to device, you'll see that both of these, you have the option of field of view. The Anker gives you the option of resolution, but again, it's a 4K sensor. I believe it's a 4K sensor. No, it may not. It may only be, so I might have been wrong this whole time. It is a 1080p sensor, so that's why the image quality is not as good as the Logitech Brio, because it's a 1080p, but you'd think it would still be better than how it looks right now. So you can actually switch the frames per second on the Anker, where you cannot do that on the Logitech Brio, which means that the Anker could actually be used for gaming. In fact, if you go to modes, you'll see there's a customizable, personal, streaming, and meeting mode. So streaming mode, like live streaming games or whatever, you'd put it on that to get the higher frames per second, or you would just customize it in the customizable mode. Let's go to show you, if I go to 78 and 78, you'll see again, these sort of match up. You'll see that the Anker looks a little bit wider. My face looks a little wider on the Anker than it does on the Logitech Brio. Not sure why. The angles of the cameras are basically pretty close on. Let's go back to the widest. The nice thing is the Anker is much wider. And again, where the Anker can actually outperform the Brio is this auto framing or the solo frame, where I can click that and it'll automatically follow the face. Wherever I go, it's going to follow my face somehow, right? If I go down, oh, it didn't follow me there. But it also has this feature where it has auto frame. If there's multiple faces, it'll automatically get both faces into the frame, whereas solo frame is only for one face. Then we have this HDR mode, so we can turn HDR off and turn HDR off. And again, you can see still looks really good on the Brio. The Anker, it looks a little dull, but it's still, acceptable for a typical, conversation. Under the advanced settings, and then under the image settings on the Anker, this is where you have the brightness, the sharpness, the contrast, all those different settings that you can customize in each app. So there's not much in the Anker. There's actually not much in the Brio. I wish they both had everything that they all had. You can see that the Anker allows you to flip the camera. So watch this. I can flip the camera on the Anker one, whereas you can't on the Logitech Brio. So there's some differences as well. So I just wanted to show you the software. They're both very basic. The way Anker does it, you're kind of hidden behind this thing, and then you have to close that, and you can pop it back open again. But the Brio puts it all below, so that's kind of nice. And the Brio also lets you customize the zoom, so I can zoom in manually, as I showed you earlier in the video. You can zoom in manually, or you can zoom back out. So that's the difference. The big thing, besides from the video quality, which I think the Anker C300 is acceptable, you can see right now it looks really good. It's crisp, it's clear, it's bright. I wish it wasn't so bright in the background, whereas the Logitech is actually darker in the background. I feel like the Anker is compensating too much in the background. But the big thing is the audio quality. Which one sounds better? Which one sounds better? Does the Brio sound better, or does the Anker sound better? Because video-wise, they're both acceptable. So that is the sort of real-world comparison between these two cameras. Because really, when you're using a webcam like this, you'd be using the Logitech Brio or the Anker C300 in something like a Zoom or a FaceTime or a Google Meet or wherever. You wouldn't necessarily be using it for full-on, YouTube content, but you could. Live stream, stuff like that. You could, but you probably won't. If you like this video, click that subscribe button below. I publish new videos every Monday and Thursday whenever possible. You don't want to miss it.